After failing to get their cinematic universe off the ground, Sony has seemingly called it quits on the Sony Pictures universe of Marvel characters. Great name. Kraven, Madam Web, and good old Morbius have been the laughingstock of the comic book movie world, but I'll admit I always had a soft spot for their Venom trilogy and considered it a separate, slightly more successful venture than those other three. I mean, at least these made money. Venom has always been one of, if not my absolute favorite Marvel character, and if we're being honest, I actually like him more than Spider-Man, so I've always been highly invested in the character's portrayal in these movies. With mixed results. There's a lot of things wrong with these movies, but as a huge fan of the character, there was a lot about them that I really enjoyed too. The first movie is a by-the-numbers, generic mid-2000s superhero movie script that only starts to pick up in the last half hour, and the second is a really campy, self-aware romp that highlights some of my favorite Venom and Carnage moments from the over-the-top, ridiculously edgy era of 90s comics. I'll always defend Let There Be Carnage as being a good time despite its shortcomings and kinda missing the point about why Carnage is cool near the end, but now we've reached the end of the trilogy. And I can't help but feel that this is somehow the weakest entry so far. You know, for me at least. Venom 3: The Last Airbender is my least favorite of the three movies, and I suppose I'd like to figure out why. So if you'll step right up and give me this dance, let's figure out why Tom Hardy's final Venom movie didn't quite work.
I won't forget you, buddy.
One of the first things that felt off about this whole thing was figuring out what the hell story to tell after Spider-Man No Way Home didn't use Venom in any meaningful way. It's very likely another in the shockingly long list of MCU post-credit scenes that will have no payoff because they're just throwing shit at the wall now, we can all tell. Given that the symbiote started rambling some nonsense about being able to see through the multiverse, I thought they were going to have Tom Hardy's Venom hate Spider-Man because they saw Tobey Maguire kill a different Eddie and symbiote somewhere else in the multiverse. I mean, shit, Peter 2 even mentions that in the same movie. I didn't exactly think it was a good idea, but it was something, I guess, for getting Spider-Man and Venom in a room together finally. I've always gone on record as believing Venom can function very well as a solo character and doesn't need Spider-Man to work. But it still would be nice for them to, like, be aware of each other's existence and interact in some capacity. I've always thought their arc as enemies to friends was really cool, and I would like to see that be adapted at least one more time since the goddamn 90s. Sony's been trying to lead into some kind of crossover event with all these solo movies, but all the pieces either get cut out, reshot, or changed entirely, and it's led Venom 3 to being in a really weird place. It seems like this movie was the backup idea they landed on after another plot involving Spider-Man or the Sinister Six didn't pan out. Nothing from these previous two post-credit scenes feels like it was setting up this, but here we are. Venom 3: The Last Jedi now flounders as it exhaustedly tries to wrap up its story with a tangible lack of enthusiasm, and many story elements pulled from the comics that could be awesome in a vacuum feel awkwardly crammed in together and fighting for screen time. The final result is a lackadaisical, disjointed, and a bit disappointing for a big fan of all the Venom stories it's trying to combine. The plot now centers on Eddie and his clothes after going home to their original dimension. Apparently Eddie and friend have bonded in such a way that consuming them will give Null, the evil god of symbiotes, a way to escape his billion-year-long imprisonment on the symbiote homeworld. To catch Venom, Null sends an army of xenophages, a species that are nearly unkillable natural predators for symbiotes. I'm just glad they didn't use the poisons, because those suck. So it's like a hodgepodge of King in Black, Absolute Carnage, and a little bit of The Hunted thrown in. Unfortunately, I don't really love how all of those elements come in together, because the symbiote codex thing from the comics made a lot more sense there. Instead, it was a genetic imprint of symbiote DNA left in the cerebral spinal fluid of anyone who had ever worn one, and Carnage discovered that if he ripped the codex out of people and ate it, he could rebuild Null's original symbiote hive mind and help bring him back to kill all life in the universe, which is totally Carnage's thing. That was a fun event because the codex was inside dozens of named major Marvel characters, because so many symbiotes had been around since the 80s. Captain America, Spider-Man, shit, most of the Avengers, Deadpool, like 1,000 people in New York. all had symbiotes at one point or another, so it was exciting for all of them to be targets for Carnage and his army. Shit, Deadpool's had like 6 symbiotes at one point or another. He was wearing 4 at once. But the movies killed Carnage off and can't do any crossovers in ways that matter, so the Codex is now something that only Eddie and his symbiote have, just for plot convenience, I guess. Between that and the several crimes they both actually definitely committed, our heroes are now also on the run from Earth-based authorities trying to stop the symbiotes from breeding and taking over the world. This half of the story is more of a follow-up to the first movie's events, with all these extra aliens surviving from the Life Foundation. I think it's a little cheesy to have the symbiote dissection lab literally be Area 51, but I suppose it fits the tone of the trilogy and feels right out of a 90s comic. Weirdly, not much from Venom 2 seems to come into play here. Nothing with Carnage is brought back up, and Patrick Mulligan's time as Toxin has apparently come and gone entirely off-screen. I think they realized it wouldn't make sense for a symbiote offspring from Carnage born on Earth just a few months ago to know who Null and the Xenophages are, so they had to give him the other green one to plot dump and give exposition. Everything this character says feels like it was written and rewritten based on test screenings, because he's just going into so much detail about what's going on to keep the characters and the audience up to speed.
Everyone, everything.
How do we stop whatever's up there from coming down here?
You can't.
Like, I get the vibe that all of this lore dropping was added in post at the 11th hour because the movie wasn't doing a good enough job at explaining the stakes. And other than repeating information we already know like 3 times, green Toxin is really useless. Patrick Mulligan was a neat character in the comics that was more of a chaotic good symbiote as opposed to Venom's looser morals and Carnage's sadism. He was a third alternative, where he was a symbiote host that was trying to be more like Spider-Man in terms of morals and his look. His odd couple pairing with his wisecracking and irresponsible symbiote is also really similar to how the movies portrayed the relationship between Eddie and his own alien costume. But then they sort of forgot the character existed, and then later on killed him off-panel one day just so they could, use his symbiote for other stuff without having to worry about the host. The movie did the opposite, but it's funny how even in an adaptation, Patrick Mulligan can't catch a break and ends up just getting killed in service of a Venom story. A character that's doomed to get tossed to the wayside in every universe. Instead, most of the screen time he could have had is spent on this mini character arc for the Area 51 scientist Teddy Payne, who I guess was struck by lightning as a child, and somehow the residual energy of that in her electric scar allows a symbiote to give her speedster power. Hey, where's Anne Weying? She was such a huge part of the first 2 movies, even becoming She-Venom in both of them to save Eddie a couple times. It just feels weird that she's not here at all. I thought she would have even maybe been in New York in the final scene, but nothing. Stan Lee even told them not to give up on her. Come on, guys! Her absence is felt in this movie, especially since she played a big part in the Donny Cates comics that inspired this movie. Even though she was technically dead since the 90s due to some poorly written fridging to keep Venom a villain, even if it didn't work at all. No Dylan Brock in this universe.
You're gonna die alone, Eddie.
There's hardly any story here, but it's dragged out painfully long. This movie's barely 100 minutes long, and finding that out shocked me because it felt like it was 2.5 hours at least while I was watching it. So little happens, and it happens so slowly, that the entire thing has this exhausted feeling to it. Oh man, I just want to be done already. Was the intention for the movie to feel sleepy, slow, and eager to die to mimic how Eddie feels? Or was that just the vibe on set leaking into the final product? This takes place only a year after the first Venom movie, but it's so clear that Tom Hardy aged 7 years in between, and his energy is just so low for this whole thing. He almost feels like he doesn't want to be here anymore, and even the symbiote seems a little less enthusiastic than it was in Let There Be Carnage. Both performances by Hardy just feel disinterested this time by comparison. It's especially obvious if you watch all 3 of the movies back to back. What happened? This weirdly low energy in the performances is made way worse by really lethargic editing. Maybe Eddie's body was really just struggling to keep up with the symbiote and it was aging him. Or maybe it was just the stress of being a fugitive, eating people's heads all the time, having a screaming alien toddler in his brain 24/7, and only getting pissed drunk in the MCU for a day before being sent back to the much less successful universe. Yeah, it's okay, buddy. I'd be pretty upset if I were you too. There are so many scenes that feel like they go on much longer than they need to, especially in the second act. Like, there are times when it cuts to the workers at the lab piecing things together, and then it just keeps hanging on them. Like, they just keep talking and standing around, and we're really desperate to get back to Venom, but we're just spinning our wheels here. The film's score doesn't punch up any of these scenes. Instead, it's just really understated or sometimes not present at all, making it feel like there's a lot of dead air where music could be boosting the tempo, but instead, it's just a scene of the characters having these big gaps of silence, or just ambient noise from the set.
You would make a good dad.
This feels weird and incomplete, like that cut of the Tom Cruise Mummy trailer where half the audio tracks were disabled. Then Eddie meets two-handed Dr. Connors and his hippie family, and every scene with them feels like it's 10 or 15 minutes long, even though it's not. This family was clearly added as a way to endear us to Venom as a hero, by giving them someone to care about and protect. And we needed to remember Eddie's not a bad person by bonding with these nice people and then saving their lives. But the point of it is belabored so much by scenes that go on for so long. We just can't cut away when he's having these awkward, stilted conversations with them. He's just being weird and fidgety and sweaty and clearly in immense trouble, and they're so oblivious and carefree that they just keep talking to him anyway for long stretches without much actually being said. I really thought they were going to sing the entirety of Major Tom. Everything that happens in Las Vegas feels like it could have been a montage. You could quickly cut between these scenes and get us through so much faster, but instead they're just full individual scenes that are unbearably slow. It's absurd that we dedicated this much time to Eddie Brock being unable to find a black and white suit when one of the symbiote's most unique and memorable powers was being able to turn specifically into black and white clothes. I hate that they cut that out of this adaptation, and this long, boring, unfunny scene of him trying to steal a tux off some drunk feels like it's adding insult to injury. It's like if they made a Superman movie where he doesn't have the ability to fly, then there's like a long scene of him going, "God, life would be so much easier if I could fly, but alas, I do not have such a power." The fuck are you doing? The xenophage also has the ability to disguise itself as inanimate objects and secretes paralytic chemicals to prey on symbiotes, so it feels like a missed opportunity to neglect that too. Instead, they're just big monsters. They do have this insane organic wood chipper mouth that's admittedly kinda awesome, but it feels like these movies hurt themselves by ignoring so many good symbiote powers. At least they remembered Carnage can send his symbiote through the internet. They get huge points for that. Alright, come here, okay. Low-key, Mrs. Chen could get it. Even though the symbiote knows they're in danger, it insists on doing this dance number despite Eddie's warnings, and then exactly what he said was gonna happen happens instantly. I know a lot of YouTube film criticism boils down to people thinking movies need to follow 100% perfect external logic, and that anyone making a mistake or doing something questionable is somehow a plot hole. But this is a really egregious moment of the characters deliberately acting stupid so the plot can continue to happen. If Eddie and the suit stay concealed indefinitely, Knowles' hired monsters would never find them. But then there's no story. You need them to get caught. So I think maybe it would have been a little more cool to devote this segment of time to another action sequence. Maybe Venom encounters some armed criminals pulling a heist in one of the casinos, and they're forced to transform for a hot second to save a civilian's life. Then at least they get caught while doing something heroic instead of just goofing off. That sounds like a complex sequence, but it'd probably not last as long as the combined runtime of them getting pissed on by a stranger, playing slots, and then dancing with a stone cold fox. Well, the title is The Last Dance, so they had to actually dance, you see. A major plot point in the first two movies was that symbiotes and hosts need to be compatible to fully transform. Otherwise, the symbiote quickly burns out the host and kills them or leaves them comatose. But in order to have a big Iron Legion-style battle sequence to close out the trilogy, we're kind of throwing that rule away and then just going with symbiotes can attach to anyone like in the comics. Thus, the only way to save anyone at Area 51 is to just let all the staff be infected and turn into Toy Biz action figures from the mid-90s. And I'll admit, that was a lot of fun, and I'm okay with it. Barring Agony, these all seem to be brand new symbiotes that are pretty cool looking and feel right out of the 90s splash pages drawn by Sam De La Rosa. If they were going to introduce a bunch of symbiote characters just to be instantly killed off in a big fight, I'm glad these were all original characters and mostly not named ones that I actually care about. A lot of comic book movies and shows lately that need incidental throwaway characters in small roles will use the name of a character from the books, completely fuck up their costume and personality, maybe just not give them powers at all, and then have them get quickly killed off. On that note, what a giant missed opportunity with Rex Strickland in a major role in this movie. I think him being a symbiote that merged with the body of a dead soldier to hide itself from detection on Earth during the Vietnam War is weird and really interesting world building. But this movie stands firm on the symbiotes only having been on Earth for a little over a year, plus 6 months. So Rex is just some guy. Did you know this scientist lady is named after a villain from Morbius comics that has a robot arm? At the very least, Null is treated well in this movie. He's got the same nefarious presence and the same end of times vibe if he ever gets free. I kind of like the idea of him being so powerful that they needed to make sure he can't even show up because everyone would be too underprepared. I know Sony was probably hoping he could be like their Thanos for some big event crossover, but if this was the last time we ever saw him in this particular iteration, I'd be okay with that too. Leave him wanting more, I suppose. I really feel like the biggest flaw of this trilogy becomes the most obvious in this installment. That being that Eddie Brock is not the one in control as Venom, and is instead mostly a helpless passenger that's along for the ride while the suit does 95% of the work. I do wish these movies hadn't given general audiences the wrong impression that Eddie is just a vehicle that the suit drives around, and that the symbiote is the silly one doing ridiculous things. While the sense of humor with Venom as a combined entity being morbidly goofy is on full display, the thing that's missed is that Eddie is the one doing most of this. The suit was the serious one that mostly remained silent with its mouth closed, flowing around like an ominous shadow, just beaming thoughts directly into Eddie's head instead of speaking verbally. There was even a time when Eddie had the same powers but no symbiote at all. And guess what? He still acted like this. Eddie Brock is the half that lets Venom function as an uninhibited, singing and joking maniac with a dark sense of humor, but the movies portray him more as the straight man that's a victim of the hijinks. This adaptation gets a lot of things right, but a lot of small but very crucial things wrong. You know, like they did with Carnage. And then, of course, I think the character has been damaged in the public eye by calling this thing Venom, instead of just the symbiote, or unpronounceable alien frequency. Like I said, I think you should just call it the suit. In Venom: The Last Unicorn, Eddie's a very reactive character who doesn't have much to do. He's just carrying around the real main character, and Tom Hardy's lack of desire to be here comes through in the performance, which harms the usually fun buddy dynamic these movies had before. I want to be more sad that they're calling it quits, but the emotions don't hit me in this final sequence the way they should with the symbiote's great sacrifice. Maybe because I didn't believe the symbiote would really die here, or maybe because I just had this feeling like this scene was only happening because this entire wing of the franchise is in its death throes after Morbius and Madam Web underperformed and there's a lack of interest in the studio to keep going with this series. Like, alright, wrap it up, give them an ending, we're done, we're not bankrolling any more of these if they're going to keep flopping. And then Kraven came out. The movie's pacing and direction feel dry and lacking in excitement, and I wish the ideas pulled from the comics here gelled better than they do. And I wish they hadn't left out so many crucial little pieces about all these characters that would have made them more interesting. But even still, this iteration of the character had its charms and certainly left an impression on people enough for him to make it to a full trilogy anyway. It seems like Tom Hardy's time as Venom has wrapped up unless some kind of miracle happens and he shows up in Spider-Man 4. But they have planted the seeds for Agent Venom in this very movie. And they were clever enough to keep him masked and not have to cast him yet. Somehow I feel like getting his legs eaten by a giant space alien is maybe like less heroic than they were damaged trying to save another soldier's life. Hey Flash, how'd you lose your legs? Eaten by an alien. I just can't shake the feeling that this won't go anywhere, though. The same way I don't think Morbius and Vulture are going to team up with Kraven the Hunter and battle the 4 Spider-Women. Right now, the future seems dark for most Spider-Man characters on the big screen. Venom 3: The Last Samurai isn't unwatchable or lacking in redeeming qualities, but I couldn't help but feel like the negatives outweighed the positives and dragged down the experience for me. But by God, is it still a lot more watchable than these other 3.
I won't forget you, buddy.
I always get mad at YouTube for not putting my videos in the subscription box because people will comment, "Finally, Xavier uploads again after all these years," not knowing 3 other videos came out within the last month already. So maybe that stupid bell icon thing will help you remember I exist. If you want other ways to support the channel, you can always go hit up that Patreon for early videos and exclusive stuff because it's just $1. I'm not kidding, it's only $1. Isn't that cool? If just 5% of the people subscribed to me donated only $1 a month, I could make videos even faster and keep my house. You can also check out our merch on TeePublic, or just buy some of my random stuff on eBay. I have a pretty substantial collection of old toys that are still in the box in perfect condition, so go take a look in case you find something you like. And lastly, since this is a YouTube video and you probably play Fortnite, drop my creator code XavierGM next time you buy a silly dance or a cool character skin. Really helps me out. See you next time!